Hello and welcome to Big Baseball and Beyond, a D1 baseball podcast. My name is Patrick Ebert. His name is Burke Granger. And we're going to spend, 30, 40, 50, 180 minutes with you today talking about Midwest baseball. We've been seeing a lot of Big Ten action lately. Burke stepped out of that boundary a little bit this past weekend. Just stepped right outside the Midwest boundary and traveled into West Virginia for some, what is that, Big 12 action.
Big 12, yeah.
Yeah. So he's going to share some of that with you today. So how you doing today, Burke?
I'm good, man. We'll try to keep it under 180 minutes, but other than that, I'm not ready to commit to going much lower than that. Although we always we aim for 30, and then we can go plus or minus 10 and still be comfortable.
If we go 180, I'm going to need several refills. So.
Me too, brother.
Start on a good note there. So
I wanted to ask you a question real quick. I don't know if you've heard last week on our podcast, you called out Michael Patrick Rooney on St. Patrick's Day, the luck of the Irishman. You called him out and told him to get on the Big Ten Plus bandwagon. And he responded on the main cast and said he's already there. He agrees with your assessment. He likes it. But he also gave you some props. Patrick is like has a 4-game lead on our staff-wide pick'em league. And I'm not real big on player comps when you're asked to comp an amateur to a pro, but I thought Runes had a good one for you. So in terms of your prognostication abilities, he comped you to Biff Tannen in Back to the Future Part 2, who used the sports almanac to correctly predict sporting outcomes. So I'll put you on the spot, Patrick. Do you have a sports almanac, and is that how you're running away with our pick'em and our staff pick'em?
I can't confirm or deny that I have a sports almanac from like the future, or what would that be, the past? But
yes.
I have been looking into buying a DeLorean lately. So
yes, yeah.
My tax return was probably about $5 more than what it's been in the past 3 years. And I feel pretty confident about that advancement moving forward. So yeah, I've been looking at some old school 1970s sports card. And I mean, Back to the Future people of our generation is kind of like that iconic 80s movies. So, you have, what do you have? Like Tom Selleck driving the Ferrari in Hawaii, and you have Dom Johnson driving the Lamborghini or whatever that was, or maybe that was a Ferrari too, in Miami Vice. But the DeLorean is just extra classic. You got those gull wing doors and stuff. Basically, I'm just deflecting the question because I'm not going to tell anyone my secrets of why I'm doing so well, because I don't even know why I'm doing so well. So it's just, I guess, luck of the Irish for that St. Patrick's Day theme.
If you do well enough, we can lobby KP for a bonus, and you could buy one of those Don Johnson pastel sport coats with the sleeves rolled up.
Ooh, yeah, or just white.
Yeah. Oh, that would be nice. You could pull that off.
Like white with black pants and just like a t-shirt underneath. Yeah, that's a good look.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Good call though. I'm glad Runes reached out to you. So I'm glad he's listening. So thank you, Runes.
He's a longtime listener and no-time caller, apparently. Give us a call, Runes. Come on.
I heard the podcast, they talked about ice scrapers, which from a Midwest podcast, like, we don't even think about that. Like, I take them out of my car for the summer months, but they go right back in at the first sign of bad weather. And then they probably don't come out until like June. But Runes shared a funny story about how like they received a gift from his day job, where they handed out to their loyal customers. And of course, Runes does a lot of work down in Arizona. And it's like the things you don't think about, like being a Midwesterner, like people in Arizona don't need an ice scraper. Kendall down in Texas doesn't need an ice scraper.
No,
like you and I,
yeah.
You and I, unfortunately, probably have more ice scrapers than we care to own. So
it's a common thing to pass out here in the Midwest. Like
correct.
Like insurance companies will give out a calendar and an ice scraper with their logo on it. It's
right.
It's as Midwestern as apple pie here.
You remember when you used to get free crap when you signed up for a bank account? And I'm talking like, I don't know, 30, 40. And like, I remember I'd go with my grandma and she'd get a deposit and they'd hand you a deck of cards or something. And that was like a big deal. Yeah. And you get a toaster or whatever. But I remember those ice scrapers, they would like, for a while, I didn't own an ice scraper that had a company name, address and phone number on it, probably a fax machine number. This is probably before the internet. So there was no like website around there or anything, but again, perspective, Midwest perspective here. So ice scrapers, very much part of our lives. I wish they weren't.
Absolutely.
So yeah, on that note, Burke, tell me about your baseball background. We're coming up on opening day on Thursday. I think Thursday's the day, right? I mean, aside from Cubs and Dodgers over in the MLB Tokyo series, which from what I could tell, I honestly didn't watch any of that series. I've just been kind of laser focused on college baseball, but from what I could tell, it was a rousing success, and just the amount of popularity and attention that it garnered. But aside from all that, with the advent of opening day coming on Thursday, I wanted to ask you, how did you get to be? Because I know you're like me. We're freaks, right? Like anybody that does this for a living. Yeah, we're junkies, and we're cut from a very different cloth, and it's something that I've always noticed with baseball people is that we have that shared passion for it, and it's just something that it's like one of those unspoken things that you just kind of know that it's a shared bond. So, tell me, where did that start for you?
I've been asked this question before, and I don't have a fantastic answer. Like baseball has always been my kind of favorite sport. I grew up in a small country town in Northwestern Ohio, and kind of football runs the roost there. If like everyone's favorite sport is football, and I played football and I was decent at football, but I remember one of my earliest memories is like in third grade, we had to write down what our favorite sport was. And I was the only kid in my whole class that wrote down baseball. Everyone else wrote down football. And I was kind of viewed as an outcast because like my parents weren't that into it. I was kind of the one like begging them to take me out into the backyard. Both my mom, even more often than my dad, or to take me to baseball games down in Cincinnati. Was the closest major league park. We would go over Riverfront Stadium, and at the AstroTurf wonderland that is Riverfront Stadium. But the Reds were good.
Stadiums, right? Like Pittsburgh and the Donut Stadium, like Pittsburgh and that. Yeah.
Pittsburgh had one, but the Busch Stadium was like that, where they would play multiple sports. And but at the time, I didn't realize I was looking at a crappy AstroTurf field. To me, it was a cathedral of baseball in this urban area, so I loved it. But just always been a huge baseball fan. Played through high school and junior college, and then after that, I started my own blog, and I was a big college baseball fan, and I would follow guys like Aaron Fitt, who was then at Baseball America, and Kendall Rogers at Perfect Game, and I was familiar with Eric Sorensen and Shotgun Spratling and you at Perfect Game at the time. Like there weren't a lot of outlets for college baseball, so I would try to soak as many of them in as possible. So for me to now be kind of working with all these guys that I might be their same age, but I feel like I grew up reading them. It's kind of a surreal moment. So for this college baseball thing to go full circle, and now I'm one of the people out doing it. So it's just awesome. So working for a place like we do with D1 Baseball, you get to fuel that addiction that we have for baseball, and get access that most of the country doesn't have. So I just love it.
Yeah, right.
How about you? What was your what got you into this beautiful sport?
Yeah, so it would probably been like 1980. So, of course I'm dating myself here, but that's okay. I went to a Brewer game with my family. I think it was like a work function that my dad had in Old County Stadium. And I remember when the first time Cecil Cooper stepped up to plate and the whole crowd was yelling Coop. And of course, it's like one of those things in all sports, you have a guy named Cooper and everybody goes Coop. And I thought they were booing him. And then my dad or my brother or both, are just like, no, they're saying Coop. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. I mean, he instantly became my favorite player. He's been my favorite player of all time. And like, I was hooked from that day forward, and like Halloween, I got dressed up as a Brewer, and I remember being in Cub Scouts and carving a pumpkin like a Milwaukee Brewer. And of course, like 1982, the only time the Brewers went to the World Series, that was a big deal. But then just as time went on, because I mean, I wasn't athletically gifted enough to play past, high school, or I wasn't even that good in high school. But I always knew that I had a different eye for the game, and I would watch and soak up so much. And really when the college game started getting interesting for me, it was 1992. I remember it specifically because Phil Nevin was playing for Cal State Fullerton with the games on ESPN. And I again, it gave me a new outlet, more games to watch, because I was watching the Mets on WWOR. I was watching the Cubs on WGN. I was watching the Braves on TNT or TBS, whatever the two. The Brewers, of course, locally, any ESPN night game, and then also in the college games were coming a bigger and bigger thing. And I just soaked it up and loved it. And, probably at the turn of the millennium, in the advent of the internet and all those wonderful things, I started to write about it on blogs and stuff. I had, like you, I had 2 or 3 of my own, baseball related blogs, focused on the draft at the time, but really a lot of college stuff. And I started to have people reaching out to me, and I actually had people that would send me like video of players from like Team USA and stuff that they saw, and it would help me like see these people for myself. So it was just a really cool to kind of like grow and build that to what it is now. Because it's been a hell of a ride. So it's been a lot of fun.
So when you were playing baseball and they would yell, "Ee," were you thinking they were honoring you like Coop, or were you just booting balls left and right?
Yeah, booting balls left and right. Yeah. So I was that left-hander but I was like the smallest kid in my class. So they'd stick me at first base because I was left-handed, and the balls would just like sailing over my head, and I had 0 wingspan. And they put me at second base, and being that awkward left-handed second baseman out there. So
that at that level, it's not that uncommon to see left-handed shortstops, left-handed catchers, though, and it's
Yep, I did catch a game once because a teammate of mine had a left-handed catcher's mitt. That was either middle school or early high school. So that was fun. And by high school, I ran track and cross country, so I was faster and I had a decent arm. So I could contribute. I couldn't hit worth shit. So that's pretty much the end of my baseball career. So.
Well, it happens to everyone. Mine just happened to happen in junior college where I couldn't hit for shit. Like, first day of fall practice, I showed up and the coach was like, "Hey, everyone raise your hand if you batted 3rd or 4th on your high school team." And everyone raises their hand. He's like, "Guess what? Someone's going to have to bat 9th and learn how to bunt." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll bat 9th and learn how to bunt." So, anything to stay in the lineup.
Well, you were a catcher too, right?
Yes. Yeah. I was known more for my defensive abilities than I always tell people I batted 400 in junior college. If you add my freshman and sophomore batting averages together.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, catchers, man, like you can catch the ball. I mean, you'll play a while. So
yeah, if pitchers like throwing to you, and I called my own games and they enjoyed that. So that they can carry a poor hitter in a lineup if you know how to receive and call a good game, handle pitching staff.
Yeah. That's the one thing my oldest son could do really well. And he received the ball so softly. And his coaches would always talk, because you talk about soft hands. You can't teach soft hands. You can work on it, right?
Yeah.
But you can't teach it. And that's something he did really well. And I remember there were times that he would catch just because he was like me, he couldn't hit worth a lick, but he defended really well. So that can take you a while. So take you a distance. So yeah. But we didn't come on to talk 180 minutes about our glory days. We came on.
Let's mix in some college baseball, I guess.
Yeah, let's mix in some college baseball. So, Burke, what do you think about the Big Ten? There's 3 teams at the top right now. They're each 7-2. You got number 10 Oregon. You got number 24 UCLA, just made their top 25 debut today, Monday. We're recording on a Monday here. And then you have Iowa, who continues to play really well. Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
the first thing that jumps out is obviously Oregon. They've been a top 10 team, I think, or top 10 or 11 team all year long, and kind of playing up to expectations. But then, like, I mean, it's hard to criticize a 7-2 team in the league, but it's also a little bit surprising that they got shut out on Saturday by Rutgers, a Rutgers team that was kind of struggling to throw the ball, and then even not sweeping Minnesota the weekend prior. The good news, I guess, if you're a Ducks fan, is they're going to Ohio State this weekend, who has been really struggling, especially on the pitching side. So I'll be there for all 3 games of that series, and I'm just really looking forward to an opportunity to really hone in on all those Oregon players. So, and then UCLA, I'm really excited. Spoiler alert, that you're going to see them this coming weekend at Purdue, because that was a team, I've talked about it, like that super talented freshman class that they had last year, and they all played and they took some licks. We knew they were talented enough to be a regional caliber team. And they're certainly playing like it so far this year. So it'll be good for one of you or I. And I know some other staff members have seen them, but I'll be excited for you to get a look at them and hear you report back on this podcast next week. And then Iowa, I talked about this when I was a guest on Shotgun's podcast last week. Like, it almost feels like they could be, we had these high expectations for Iowa last year, and they didn't come through. And it's almost like this might be the team after the team where they didn't have those high expectations, but the pitching staff of Obermueller is really kind of surpassed what I thought he was this year. I always knew he was talented, but he took a really big step from his sophomore to junior year. Aaron Savory, I've talked about him. He didn't pitch particularly well on Saturday, but they got good bullpen appearances behind him, and they're hitting the ball well. So 3 teams at 7-2. It's still early, but it's been exciting to watch them, and I'm looking forward to see how that'll play out the remainder of the Big Ten conference season.
Iowa's hitting the ball really well. I mean, like really, really well. Their Big Ten opponents so far, and it's kind of same with Oregon, haven't been the most loaded. They're kind of playing the lower tier of the conference right now, at least how things have stacked up so far. But yeah, I saw Iowa early in the year, as you well know, and like, I think they've taken some big steps. They have some young players, some new guys filling in some key roles on that team. Obviously, we've talked about it before. No Brody Brecht, no Marcus Morgan. Like some very key pieces are gone, but I think in a way that's may have helped them. Like you mentioned, the team after the team. I think they're learning how to play better as a team. And I think last year with those expectations and that star power, sometimes you can lose sight of what makes you and what puts you in those situations. And I'm not saying that is what happened, but I think they are playing better as a team. Obviously, they're playing really well. Team to watch for sure. UCLA, you mentioned I'm going to go see them at Purdue this weekend. I'm super excited. They came into the top 25. They have played good teams. They have played really good teams so far. They've beaten Maryland, Nebraska, and Indiana so far this season. So they've played a tough schedule. I think Oregon will be interesting. I think Oregon's really good. I know that you're excited to see it for yourself. But the month of April, I believe, they're going to be put to the test a lot more. They have Michigan, they got Maryland, they got UCLA, they got Oregon State in a 4-game set at the end of the month. Certainly all of those things that, all those questions that we may have about a team, they're going to be put to the test here in the next month. And I'm really excited about that. It's been fun to have these West Coast teams included in the Big Ten team, as awkward as it is to have them, as much as it doesn't make sense. It is truly a coast-to-coast conference, which is kind of weird, but it is what it is. Yeah.
ACC is the same way. It's weird to see, especially when the A stands for Atlantic, and you got teams on the Pacific Coast on there. So, but it's almost not as weird as it's not as weird as I anticipated it would be. Like we're a few weeks in now, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, the two best teams in the Big Ten are Oregon and UCLA. It should sound weird, but it doesn't. UCLA, I'm really impressed that they dropped that first game against a good Indiana team, and then battled back and won the next two. And Sunday's game was contested. So that's how a young team kind of gets galvanized and matures in a hurry, is when they're playing against good quality teams and winning those rubber matches on Sunday. So it's been fun to watch, and I'm again looking forward to it from here on out.
I believe Rutgers threw their freshman Landon Mack on Saturday, and that's who shut down Oregon that game. I think he's having a really good freshman season. Name to watch. We haven't talked about Rutgers a ton. To be perfectly honest, Rutgers hasn't given us a lot of reason to talk about them. But I know that's another team I think you intend to see in a few weeks. So hopefully some firsthand observations will give. I mean, Steve Owens is a great coach, not trying to take anything away from the Rutgers program. They did lose a lot from last year's team, especially like their pitching staff was kind of decimated from what they had, and some injuries are at play there too. So,
and the Big Ten Player of the Year on the position player side too.
Yeah. Josh Kuroda-Grauer, the shortstop, he was one of my favorites in the college game last year. So yeah. On the flip side, I want to bring up two teams. I want to bring up Washington. I want to bring up Nebraska. Washington now is 4-2 in the Big Ten, which I find interesting because last weekend they were swept by Gonzaga. And they lost a game to a Division III team, Pacific Lutheran. But now they have beaten Nebraska and Maryland in their first two Big Ten weekends, which says something, right? Like
it does, absolutely.
And I think that's what kind of see like Washington, but they're not the only team that's kind of having this up and down kind of topsy-turvy season, and they're competitive, right? They wouldn't be winning these series if they weren't competitive. I think it's been impressive to watch. They've certainly piqued my attention. Nebraska on the flip side, like a ranked team coming into the season, full of expectations. They've now, they've lost their staff ace for the season. He's been out for a few weeks now. They've lost series to Washington and UCLA. They host Oregon State this coming weekend. I mean, I've called them Texas A&M of the North because it's kind of what they are, lofty expectations, and they just when you think, like how early is it in the season when they have a must-win series, and that's kind of how it's been the past few weeks, and they keep losing. So they got to figure it out. Like if it happens against Oregon State and Lincoln this weekend, we'll be paying attention. If they lose again, well, then that gets pushed back another week, and it gets to the point where they're going to have to really start worrying about, making the Big Ten tournament, much less anything else that they may have thought they could have done coming into the season.
I do like the comp to Texas A&M of the North. What the Huskers do have going for them is if they can get into that top 12 of the Big Ten, and you've covered the Big Ten tournament the last 3 years, that's essentially a home tournament for them.
Yep.
In terms of the fan base coming out and playing in front of, I think they had like 10,000 people there at the championship game last year.
Best fans of the Big Ten, and they don't have to travel, no doubt.
Yeah, and you wrote them up in the fall, and what I gleaned from the fall report is how deep that arm talent is. Whether or not they've proven themselves is one thing, but when you have talented arms and you're in a tournament environment like that, you have the advantage. Like Penn State was really thin on the mound last year and made it to the final game through the winner's bracket, but a team like Nebraska can hang around and throw some of those talented arms and survive in advance.
And they went through the loser's bracket, to your point, Burke.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking ahead, so after Oregon State, they have I think Rutgers at home, which is a winnable series for Nebraska, at Iowa, which we've talked about Iowa playing kind of above their expectations right now, and then Northwestern at home. So at least two of those are winnable series. So the good news for them is if they lose, let's say they lose 2 out of 3 to the Beavers this weekend, they don't lose any traction in the Big Ten standings.
Very true.
And then you can go in and maybe try to get hot once you resume conference play. So I think Shotgun asked me last week if it was time to hit the panic button on Nebraska. And my answer there was I would be very cognizant of where the panic button was. I don't know if I'd be hitting it yet. And the same goes for this week. I think if they don't win this weekend against Oregon State, it hurts them for the overall season. But if they can get hot and win some of these conference games, conference tournaments, or conference series, then they're right back on track in terms of making it to the Big Ten tournament. I think an at-large bid is kind of shot if they don't take 2 out of 3 against Oregon this weekend from an RPI perspective.
Right. Yeah, hard to argue with that. So if they have any type of postseason expectations with the way they're playing so far, it doesn't look very promising, but they're going to have to turn that around now as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. I think they play Kansas State too, the midweek. So
yep.
So yeah, they got a tough road ahead of them. But all right, let's talk some stuff that we saw this past weekend. Burke, why don't we start with you went up to Morgantown, West Virginia, and you saw a series between Arizona and the West Virginia Mountaineers. I think I got the city right. It's Morgantown that West Virginia plays, right?
Yes, it is.
All right.
One of the biggest college party towns in the country, I think, according to
your Friday.
Yeah. Baseball is getting pretty popular in Morgantown, and with the success that Coach Mazey had there, and then Coach Sabins is an up-and-coming coach leading them in the right direction. So they did pretty well from a fan engagement standpoint. Fans were loud. They were out. Friday's game was a 16-inning game that I went to. It was 16 innings, 14 pitchers used, 50 strikeouts, 19 walks, 6 hit by pitches. The game time is 5 hours and 34 minutes. And yes, I did stay the whole time. It was kind of a fascinating game to be at. I got extra baseball. I wasn't too mad about that since I was only going to 2 games. So getting really 3 games worth of innings and plate appearances was helpful to me. The first guy I want to talk about him is Richie Morales from Arizona. And you might be saying, Burke, that guy has a 392 OPS. Why do you want to talk about him? It's a fascinating story. So in that game on Friday, he's going up to the plate in the 16th inning. And at that point, he's 0 for 7 with 6 strikeouts.
Ooh.
Have you ever struck out 6 times in a game?
No.
I haven't either. I did strike out
3. I mean, yeah.
I struck out 5 times in an American Legion game one time, and that meant everyone else on both teams was hitting except for me. By the time I came up to the plate for that 5th at bat, he could have been throwing a beach ball. It would have looked like a golf ball. Like I was not hitting it. Like I was out of luck. And the reason I'm saying that is because Richie Morales comes up to the plate. He's 0 for 7 with 6 Ks. And he gets the big RBI single to put Arizona on top. So, like, just that mental fortitude to be able to stay in the game, that goes a long way. So props to him. And in terms of the more statistical standouts, like Colin McKinney was the guy who threw that game for Arizona on Friday. He's a big 6'5", 225 guy, pro body. He was up to 96 early. Which is firmer than he's been all year, but he missed a lot of bats, got a lot of strikeouts with that fastball. It has it's like an 80th percentile swing and miss rate on the fastball. So impressed with him. He's a draft eligible redshirt sophomore. Brendan Summerhill is a 1st round prospect. He's their center fielder. He has 6 triples, leads the country in triples. He's kind of a tall, lean, I think you saw him play as an amateur, as a high school guy.
I did.
He's a tall, lean guy, runs long strides, and it looks like he's kind of gliding when he's running. I'd say that might be his best tool is the speed. Defensively, was super impressed. He got some great jumps in the outfield. He fooled me on one like you, Patrick. I bet you're batting pretty high when the ball leaves the bat, and I reach down and I'm writing down double in my book. Well, he chases it down, lays out, and catches it. So that doesn't happen too often where a guy gets to a ball that I didn't think anyone had a chance to. And he made it, it was a diving catch, but he didn't need to overextend himself too much because he just got such a great jump and then closed on the ball so well, took a great route. The fact it was just really impressive and surprising. Offensively, he's a left-handed hitter. He used the whole field. A lot of his hits this weekend or his hard hit balls were to the opposite side, which I always enjoy watching a prospect do. Mason White is another kind of draft guy for them. He plays shortstop. He's kind of a 5'10", 185, 190, like stocky guy. He's a really good defender and moved well. He's got good first step quickness, but his likely home is as a bat first second baseman at the pro level. He hit a big he had the big hit on Sunday's deciding game, a 2-run home run. It was his 33rd of his career, which is tied for 7th in program history. There's a lot of swing and miss. If you have a nit to pick with him, there's a lot of swing and miss in the profile. He's striking out like 33% of the time, and he's played on the Cape the last 2 summers and struck out a lot there too. But with that swing and miss comes the ability to impact the baseball. So 2 stats that I look at a lot when I'm evaluating guys on the Cape or the Northwoods League, any of the collegiate summer league, where they're using wood bats, is does that power translate with wood bats, and what's the swing and miss like? So the swing and miss was elevated, and that's a concern, but a lot of his hits went for extra bases. So that helps to mitigate the concern a little bit. If he's able to figure out the contact issues and stay on the barrel more consistently, I would have less concern, but it wasn't the best weekend for him other than the go ahead home run in Sunday's game. But overall, I kind of like the profile as a mid to late round draft pick and an offensive second baseman. So big fan of him. On the West Virginia side, the only guy I'll talk about is Chase Meyer. He was, again, one of those guys I saw at numerous showcase events when he was in high school. Just the metrics are off the charts. He throws 2 different breaking balls that are over 3,000 spin. His problem in high school and as a reliever last year was the command and control issues. It's been much better this year. He was the Big 12 pitcher of the year last week in 2 appearances, including a start that he made on Sunday. So I wasn't sure when I would see him. He came in about the 11th inning of that game on Friday and absolutely shoved for 5 innings, which, that helps your morale as someone who's at the ballpark. And, I could see when he was warming up, and a great trick is that you take your video camera that has like 100 zoom and you zoom in to try to find out what number, and he wears number 99, like Wild Thing Ricky Vaughn. So I'm like, okay, Chase Meyer is warming up. So that helped me warm up physically and mentally as I'm braving the elements that he's going to come in. So I didn't need to stick around till Sunday. Yeah. So as long as he was shoving, I was not like, God, please let this game end. I'm like, hey, let's trade zeros for a while longer, because it was fun to watch. I posted a video on Twitter, and some of those sliders and curveballs are just nasty pitches. He's a really fun arm to watch, and he'll be a 26 eligible guy. And I'm just really looking forward to how he'll do in the summer. Obviously that's be a big test, and he's a guy I can anticipate coming into the draft cycle next year with a pretty high grade. So just a fun guy to cover.
Probably a Team USA guy.
For me, it would be like, it's when it's that eye popping to the eye, that noticeable to the eye. And then you look at the metrics, like he checks a lot of the boxes. The success needs to be there on the field. He needs to keep throwing strikes, but he was fun to watch. Now they did a double switch and kind of lost the DH. So he had to bat twice, which was an adventure. But that's how well he was throwing on the mound, that even when one run could have won the game for the Mountaineers, like they're like, let's keep him in, let's take the out and let him keep putting up zeros until we can get another offensive opportunity.
Yeah, West Virginia first-year head coach Steve Sabins. I believe he is a Wisconsin native, so definitely from the Midwest. So good to have him there running the Mountaineers. So yeah, that's good stuff. And Brendan Summerhill, he's from Chicago. His brother Colin played at Northern Illinois, played in the Northwoods League a little bit. Good player too for Northern Illinois. He was a catcher and an outfielder. I think he signed with the Angels, maybe as like a non-drafted free agent or something like that. But yeah, Brendan obviously is just super talented. It's funny, like that vision I have him is kind of like that Darren Erstad type, like center. I don't know why, like center field, first base. Like he can play because I've seen him play both positions, and he plays them both equally well. He's just a very gifted hitter and athlete. And I just remember that swing path, like how that barrel just stays in the zone longer, like to the eye than seemingly most other hitters. And that gives him that ability to take pitches and drive them to the opposite field and the opposite field gap, where it really puts his speed to use going around the bases. And no surprise, he's got 6 triples on the year. So
yeah, it's when you watch him glide, like it's gliding around the bases, like with these long strides, like,
yep.
And I got plus run times going from home to first. So he's an interesting prospect. Like I don't know how well he didn't hit the ball with much authority this weekend, but in batting practice, he flashed average future power.
Okay.
So, it could have just been how they were pitching him. So with a guy like that, you want to see him reach the, double-digit home runs potentially and see him impact the baseball maybe a little more before you invest $3 million in the first round on him. But that's not a decision I have to make. I can just evaluate the good stuff.
Not our problem, right?
Yeah. How about your weekend, buddy? Where you went to Northwestern, right?
Yeah, I was in Evanston, Illinois, just north of the Windy City in Chicago there. And the weather caused for a doubleheader on Friday. We had rain here in the area pretty much all day yesterday on Sunday, and Saturday was like 37 degrees, so just not too friendly baseball weather. But Friday was decent. The sun came out, and my face got a little wind and sunburn, despite the fact I was wearing a North Face winter jacket and was bundled up pretty well. But yeah, so got to look at Northwestern and Illinois for 2 games. And like with the weather around here, obviously this time of year, very blustery. Walking into Miller Park, the Northwestern's field, the flags out in the outfield were pointing directly to left field. So, immediately having seen games at that park before, I'm thinking, all right, like how many home runs are going to be hit today? It wasn't a matter of if at all, it was a matter of how many. I think there were 2 or 3 in the first game of the doubleheader, and then there were 10 in the second game. So like a lot of power was on display. Not surprising on that day, it was, almost all right-handed hitters, and all the home runs, I believe, went out to left. Saturday, I wasn't there Saturday, but the wind had shifted and it was blowing to right field. And not surprisingly, that's where the home runs were going on that day. So, but yeah, it was fun to see both teams. Completely different squads, completely different organizations. I'll start with Northwestern, just because they're still building, and, head coach Ben Greenspan got that job. What would that have been? A year ago, September, when they made the switch, when they had those problems with their previous head coach. I'm not going to go into that or mention his name or anything like that, but, they had some pretty serious problems, not just in baseball, but for football too. So they needed to make a change of the guard and turn things around quickly. I thought Greenspan was the perfect hire for that job. He was Tracy Smith's kind of right-hand man at both Arizona State and Michigan. Came from Indiana as well, I believe. So really has his foot in player development and recruiting and all that stuff. And he's been forced to, turn that program around and make them pretty competitive rather quickly. I had heard about, or actually I didn't hear, I saw Ryan Kucherak, their shortstop, play last summer. He was in the Northwoods League. He played for the Lacrosse Loggers team that made it to the championship game. And, he certainly had a big day, and it was fun to see him have a big day. The body stands out, the bat speed stands out. I knew metrically he was among the nation leaders in defense at shortstop. Didn't have a ton of opportunities to show it off, but certainly looked the part. And then he was like 75th in the nation in exit velocity, and he was second in the Big Ten to Chris Akopian, of Maryland, which gives you an idea of just his own ability to square the ball up. And his first hit, he smoked the single down the third base line. The Illinois third baseman Kyle Shupman made a diving attempt at it, couldn't get it. It was a single for Kucherak, and then he ended that game 1 with a double that he absolutely drove into the wind in right center, and it was an opposite field gap double that scored Jackson Freeman, the right fielder from first base, and ended up winning the game with that. The very next game, which started 40 minutes after that point in time, Kucherak wasted no time. He hit home runs, I think, in his first 2 at-bats, solo home runs. He pulled those to left field, and then he added another one later in the game, giving him, I think, 3 home runs for the day, what does he have for the year now? He's got 5 for the year. He raised his average probably 30 or 40 points with that day at the plate. But I really like him. And I think the talking point from that is, I mentioned Chris Akopian, and then you have Rock Chalowski at UCLA. All 3 of those guys are sophomores. Those are probably the three of the highest rated draft eligible players for the 2026 draft. Northwestern getting Kucherak from LSU. Interesting enough, Kucherak and Chalowski both played on the same high school team together in Arizona. So
wow,
I just find that kind of fascinating and just
Agreed.
Small world type of scenario. So he was the Northwestern hitter that got my attention the most. Their infield defense with Kucherak at short, Owen Mickelfatrick at third base, and Jack Counsell, who's the son of Craig Counsell and the younger brother of Brady Counsell, who plays for Kansas, playing second, short, and third is by far, in my opinion, the best infield of the Big Ten. You had Trent Lyolis is at first base, but with all due respect to Lyolis, that's not what makes the defense. It's the second, third, and shortstop that make it go. And Mickelfatrick in particular made some just standout plays at third base. He started a couple double plays, just showed really soft hands, really easy movements. He can play second base. Jack Counsell can play third base too. And all 3 of those guys really can play anywhere on the infield. And that adds that other element of it that makes them fun to watch, even if they're not always winning games. Because right now they're 10-11. They even their Big Ten record to 3-3 with the series win against Illinois. And their catcher, Bennett Markinson, another guy, he started to get it going over the weekend. Jack Lausch, the Northwestern's quarterback, on the football team, is playing center field. I shared a video of him on X of making this just fantastic running catch in center field. He took some really competitive at bats, and he had a sharp single stolen that he laced up the middle that Illinois shortstop made a really nice play on. He drew a walk with the bases loaded, small steps, right? And then on Sunday or Saturday, I should say, he absolutely unloaded on a ball. And again, I'm watching this from home in the video feed on the Big Ten Plus network. And the thing is, with the wind blowing from left to right, it pushed that ball foul. That would have been by far the farthest hit home run of that series, and it would have given him a boost of confidence. He is so close to breaking out. He ended up striking out 7 times in the 9 at-bats. Yeah. And it's one of those moments, you kind of said it before with the Arizona player, he's batting 203 and he's struck out 36 times and 74 at bats. What are you talking about? You can tell he's on the cusp of breaking out, and he's such a good natural athlete and hitter that it's coming and it's going to happen. And just overall that lineup, Jackson Freeman too, I mentioned him too, appears to be seeing the ball better. Hit a grand slam on Saturday, hit a home run on Friday. So he's seeing the ball better too. So that Northwestern lineup was expected to be their strength coming into the weekend. Not as much, but they may have found their way. Hard to know. Illinois' ERA I think is closer to 7 than it is to 6, and the wind was blowing out. So obviously all those factors play into that. But it was a good look of Northwestern.
You mentioned, and I know you wrote about it too, the strength of that team being the infield defense. And I was looking at their assistant coaches, and one of their assistant coaches is Cody Jeffries, who just 2 years ago was the starting shortstop from Michigan. And from what I recall, a pretty good defender at shortstop, a guy who played, I think, at San Diego before he went to Michigan. So you wonder if just having a guy that, I think it's kind of unusual to have not a volunteer assistant, but an actual assistant coach that young, who was just playing D1 baseball 2 years ago, like Jeffries. So you kind of wonder if he's what kind of impact he's made on those defenders in the infield.
It's a good call. And Greenspan too. I mean, it's kind of one of his things, there's certain coaches that are known for their defense, Link Jarrett down at Florida State, and Ed Service at Creighton, Rick Heller at Iowa. All their teams usually have really good defense. And so far under Greenspan, Northwestern has had a really good defense here in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll just jump right into Illinois.
Go for it.
it's kind of tough because it completely changed the narrative when Northwestern came back and walked off that first game of the series, because Illinois entered the ninth, with a 4-3 lead. And it just, like, obviously it's only a 1-run lead, but the wind hadn't really played that big of a part. And, like, the game 2 was the game that the 10 home runs were hit. Game 1 was closer. It was lower scoring. Tyler Schmidt, their staff ace, looked really good for the first few innings. He was throwing low 90s with like a mid 70s kind of a sweeping curveball and a pretty polished changeup that he pulled the string on nicely. And he got the ball to his bullpen. And those guys did a good job too. I think, who were the lefties? They have like a whole bunch of lefties that they brought out. But in that first game, who was it? It was Evan Clark and it was Zach Bates who did a good job. And then a third lefty they brought on, Reed Gannon, was the one that gave up the game tying and game winning run for Northwestern. And then further on in that series, they brought in like guys like Peyton Hutchins and Sam Reed, 2 more lefties. So one thing Illinois definitely has in their bullpen is a lot of left-handers. It felt some of it was by design in that second game because of the wind blowing out to right, or I should say the third game on Saturday. They were trying to neutralize the Northwestern bats because it was pretty clear that they were, putting the ball in the air. At least the left-handed hitters were, and the right-handed hitters were trying to hit it to the opposite field too, up in the air, to let that wind blow it out. But still, there's some nice depth of southpaws on the Illinois staff. But anyway, yeah, I mean, they were in a position to win that series, and the second game they win 11-6, and their bats get rolling. Kyle Shutman hit 3 home runs on that first day. He hit a 2-run home run in the first game. He had 2 solo home runs in the second game, and none of them were cheapos. I don't think the wind really aided them that much. He hit them and squared them up really well. I covered Shutman last summer in the Northwoods League. He came up there, played for the Rockford Rivets, had an incredible month of June. He was named to the All-Star team. He was named like all Northwoods League at the end of the season just by playing that 1 month, because that 1 month allowed him to transfer to Illinois. The Illinois coaches that saw him, they liked what they saw. They brought him down to Champaign. Shutman obviously liked what he saw and decided to transfer there after starting his career at Cincinnati. So I would say Shutman at this point in time is their best prospect offensively. Just really built well, loose athletic actions, some good strength, and obviously a power stroke, now leading the team with 7 home runs. Nick Groves, a transfer from Niagara, their center fielder, really impressed me as well. Mainly just his approach at the plate and how much he battled. And before we jumped on here, Burke, you mentioned Cameron Chialoy, who was another one of their outfielders that's not hitting the ball that well, but Groves is kind of like the left-handed counterpart to Chialoy, where similar profile, right? They're going to absolutely grind out at bats. They have a little bit of speed once they reach. There's not a ton of power for either of them. But you get Chialoy going and you've already got Groves going. That's going to be a pretty dynamic 1-2 at the top of their lineup once they get that duo going as good as they are. Same with the lineup. Vitus Valencius, their left fielder, has been hitting home runs early in the season, but their catcher Jacob Schrader and their first baseman Drake Westcott, they've been off to a little slower start. So they get that whole team going like they did. And keep in mind, this is a team that hit 104 home runs a year ago that led the Big Ten, and pretty much was the reason that they played in the postseason, and they played so well. They were the regular season champions, and then earned an at-large bid to the tournament, and has a lot to do with that power. They get that rolling again, and they showed signs of it this weekend. Again, they keep doing that without necessarily the aid of strong winds, and we're talking about a different Illinois team.
And you mentioned Drake Westcott. He was a Midwestern high school guy. I think he was an Illinois product. Went to Louisville for a couple years. Then I think this might be his 3rd year in Champaign. He's been a slow starter. I saw him early the last 2 seasons where he really struggled. And then I look up at the end of the year and I think he hit 19 home runs last year or something like that. So he's a streaky hitter that being a slow starter probably played into why he didn't play that much at Louisville, because he didn't get the opportunity to kind of work through those early season struggles. But if they get him going, what are they now? Like 2-4 in the Big Ten, but they
12-9 overall.
Yeah, I mean, I still think in terms of talent level, if they get some of those guys going, they're a middle of the road type Big Ten team. Is kind of where I would assess them. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play out. I don't know who they got next weekend.
Yeah, I didn't look either.
Okay.
That thing, like I didn't talk to Coach Hart. I actually didn't talk to either coach. I with it being a doubleheader, I really focused on my own observations and just watching them play. They're at Michigan State this coming weekend. So, and they're
Michigan
actually playing,
State team that just beat Penn State 2 out of 3 in Happy Valley.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see how that series go. But I didn't get a chance to ask like if Westcott was battling an injury at all because he hasn't been playing as much. I also don't know the status of Julius Sanchez, who had been having a good season, I think, as their Sunday starter.
Yeah.
But he's another guy. He's one of their better power arms. Their Saturday starter, Ben Plumlee, looked good, too, after Tyler Schmidt starting on Friday. So they get Julius Sanchez back. They have that full contingent of lefties coming out of the bullpen. They get Westcott swinging again, Schrader swinging again. This is a dangerous team to keep an eye on. And like I said, they're 1 out away from winning that series at Northwestern.
Yeah. And, they were just a team that constantly outperformed expectations last year and have a lot, but they brought back a lot from that team. So it's kind of surprising to see them stumbling a little bit to start the season. But to your point,
they started last year slow.
Yeah. Yep. They did. And to your point, if you're just one or two outs or 1 or 2 runs away from winning that rubber match and winning a series, that a lot can change in the course of a ball game and a season that follows. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I got from that series. I think you and I probably have talked enough with our own observations. Go to D1 Baseball, you can read a lot more, as that may be hard to believe just based on how much we share. But Burke, I know you're going to have a Granger angle out this week on Arizona, West Virginia. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yep. And my feature on Northwestern, Illinois just hit the site today too. So make sure to get yourself over to D1 Baseball, read our stuff, read everybody else's stuff too, because can't say enough about the group of guys that we work with and without tooting our own horns too much, like we do a pretty dang good job covering the game of college baseball. So,
yeah, I think Kendall had a tweet that we had like 9 or 10 guys at series at the ballpark on site this weekend all across the country. So, yeah, I'm extremely proud of the content that D1 Baseball provides and happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's so many fun. It's so funny seeing so many photos out there. It's like in parentheses, shotgun spraddling. It's just like, how many teams does that guy see? So, yeah, it's impressive. So,
yeah, he saw 6 teams in 3 different conferences this weekend.
Right.
He was at Penn State, Michigan State, then Pittsburgh, NC State, and then he went to the Sunday game, the game I missed of Arizona WVU. So he's our super utility player, Swiss Army knife at D1 Baseball. Podcast host, professional photographer, like the guy does it all.
Yeah, West Coast, East Coast, doesn't matter. He's a weekend warrior. That's what we should call him.
He is.
Where are you going this weekend, Burke?
I will be staying home and watching Oregon, Ohio State. I'm going to try to catch all three of those games. And I haven't seen Ohio State this year, even though they're in my backyard, because I know I was seeing them. And from the looks of the box scores and what I've seen online, it doesn't sound like I'm missing much, but we'll see. They got some interesting position players for sure. The pitching, they need to figure it out. Blaine Wink is back and throwing, but he got lit up a little bit last weekend. So need him to right the ship. And I want to see all these Oregon guys. Like I said, I'm super excited about it. What about you? Where are you going to be? Yeah,
but I just say about Oregon, I think I'm excited for you because I want to hear those observations at this time next week. So
yeah,
I'm going to be at West Lafayette for UCLA, Purdue, and similar. I'm pretty excited to get. I've already seen Purdue play, so not that I'm not excited to see them, but I mean UCLA here is the team that I'm most excited about, being one of 4 new entrants to the Big Ten. I haven't seen UCLA play in person for quite a while now. I think it might have been 2018. So,
wow.
John Savage is one of the best in the business. I'm excited for that alone. But, guys like Rock Chalowski and that pitching staff and the defense, like UCLA is one of those teams that are just so well coached year after year. You brought it up well before. Like last year was an aberration. They had a young team. They kind of forced a lot of young guys into the fire, and they're now seeing, those seeds that they planted last year, starting to come to life. And I'm just really excited to see it for myself.
And Alexander Field in West Lafayette is a great place to watch baseball. So
thinking about that today, one of the most underrated stadiums in college baseball.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all we got for today. Burke, I want to thank you as always for your time. Always good to hear your thoughts. Always good to talk baseball and life in general. As you said last week, that's that kind of beyond part of it. So it was good to get a little beyond out of the way before we talked about the big and the baseball. So thank you, sir. Nice job as always. My name is Patrick Ebert. We'll do this again next week. And until then, you take care and go whatever team you're rooting for opening day on Thursday.
Go Sports.